The original historic Knights Templar were a Christian military order, the Order of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, that existed from the 12th to 14th centuries to provide warriors in the Crusades. These men were famous in the High and Late Middle Ages, but the order was disbanded very suddenly by King Philip IV of France, who took action against the Templars in order to avoid repaying his own financial debts. He accused them of heresy, or ordered the arrest of all Templars within his realm, and had many of them burned at the stake. The dramatic and rapid end of the organization led to many stories and legends developing about them over the following centuries. The order and its members increasingly appear in modern fiction, though most of these references portray the medieval organization inaccurately. In modern works, the Templars generally are portrayed as villains, misguided zealots, representatives of an evil secret society, or as the keepers of a long-lost treasure. Several modern organizations also claim heritage from the medieval Templars, as a way of enhancing their own image and mystique. Modern organizations, since at least the 18th century, Freemasonry has contained references to the Knights Templar, incorporating Templar symbols and rituals in a number of Masonic bodies. The most well-known reference to the Knights Templar in Freemasonry is the degree of Knight of the Temple, or Order of the Temple. The final order joined in the united religious, military and Masonic orders of the Temple and of St. John of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes and Malta, commonly known as the Knights Templar. Freemasonry is traditionally open to men of all faiths, asking only that they have a belief in a supreme being, but membership in this Masonic body is open only to Freemasons who profess a belief in the Christian religion. These Knights Templar often take part in public parades and exhibitions, wearing distinctive uniforms, and have had a number of high-profile members such as Henry Ford and Harry S. Truman. In the later 20th century, Masonic Knights Templar have become themselves the subject of pseudo-historical theories connecting them to the medieval order, even though such a connection is rejected by Masonic authorities themselves and the source known to historians. The Order of the Solar Temple is one infamous example of a Neo-Templar group founded in 1984 that claimed descent from the original Knights Templar. There are several other self-styled orders that also claim to be descended from, or revivals of, the Templar Order. Another Templar-related order, the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, is a charitable organization founded in 1804 which has achieved United Nations NGO special status. They are a part of the larger Ordo Supremus Militaris Templi Hierosolymatani, commonly called Knights Templar International. Some members of the OSMTH claim to be the direct descendants of the original Knights Templar, using the L'arminius Charter as proof. However, this document is suspected to be a forgery. Scholarly reception. The popularity of the Knights Templar in modern fiction and the presence in pseudo-historical or fringe literature has received scholarly attention. At the 2004 annual conference of the American Culture Association, their call for papers was specifically about such conspiracy theories relating to the Templars and their association with other legends and mysterious organizations. Literary theorists puzzle over Umberto Eco's use in his novel Foucault's Pendulum of the Templars as a symbol of postmodernist rewriting of history. Historian Malcolm Barber writes that mystic Templars are omnipresent in all good conspiracy theories. On Day to Day, a program on American NPR, host Alex Chadwick discussed the literary fascination with the Knights Templar. Quote, In Poland, the Turin Museum had an exhibition entitled The Knights Templar, History and Myth, which offered a description. Apart from pieces of high art, the exhibit will grant equal importance to popular culture items exploring the subject of the Knights Templar, and in 2007, a National Post editorial noted that the Templars remain a living presence in popular culture. This has happened precisely because the historical record concerning the sudden annihilation in the early 14th century at the hands of Philip IV of France has been so sparse and ambiguous. Time and revolution have damaged and dispersed the sources, and made the Templars a magnet for speculation and imagination. Popular themes of the supposed association with the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, and the supposed historical connection to the Freemasons. The historical Templars had the first headquarters on the Temple Mount, which had been assigned to them by King Baldwin II of Jerusalem. They were in operation there for 75 years. Pseudo-historical books such as The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail theorize that the Templars could have discovered documents hidden in the ruins of the temple, possibly proving that Jesus survived the crucifixion, or possibly proving Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene and had children by her. Indeed, the supposition that the Templars must have found something under the Temple Mount lies at the heart of most Templar legends and pseudo-historical theories, also popularized by French author Louis Charpentier. There is no physical or documentary evidence, however, to support such a supposition. It is true that they are documented as having carried a piece of the true cross into some battles, but this was probably a portion of a timber that was discovered during the 4th century by St. Helena, the mother of the Emperor Constantine. Relics and Treasure. There are various legends concerning a treasure that some Templars managed to hide from King Philip and that was later lost. One particular story concerns Rennes-le-Château, where a treasure was supposedly found in the 19th century. One speculative source for the treasure was the long-lost treasure of the Templars. In 1910 publication by one Joaquin Muret y Sans, the case is made that the Knights Templar hid and buried the great treasure in Vrana, Zadar County, because Ramon from Cerro near Granja del Pez in Noguera in Catalonia gave a generous gift to the Knights Templar into the hands of the Grand Master Arnold of Torolla. This Ramon was the son of Romana, the daughter of Benesmiro de Siponto, who was the justiciarius of Monte Sant'Angelo and who was sent by Pope Alexander III as a notifier to Sir Benwick. Hugh J. Schonfield argued that the Knights Templar may have found the copper scroll treasure of the Renaissance in the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. He suggested that this might explain one of the charges of heresy which were later brought against the Knights by the medieval Inquisition. Holy Grail. The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail seems to be the source of the story that has the Holy Grail found by the Order and taken to Scotland during the suppression of the Order in 1307, where it remains buried beneath Rosslyn Chapel. A 2006 book claims that the Grail was instead taken to northern Spain and protected by the Knights Templar there. Ark of the Covenant. Graham Hancock in his The Sign and the Seal claimed that the Templars discovered secrets of the Masons builders of Solomon's Temple, Zerubbabel's Temple, and Herod's Temple at the Temple Mount, along with knowledge that the Ark of the Covenant had been moved to Ethiopia before the destruction of the First Temple. Hancock claims that allusion to this is made in engravings on the cathedral at Chartres, the construction of which was greatly influenced by Bernard of Clairvaux, the Order's patron. Further links to both the search by the Order for the Ark and to its discovery of ancient secrets of building are supposedly suggested by the existence of the monolithic Church of St. George in Lalibela, Ethiopia, which stands to this day but whose construction is incorrectly attributed to the Knights Templar. Shroud of Turin. Another legendary object that is claimed to have some connection with the Templars is the Shroud of Turin. The shroud was first publicly displayed in 1357 by the widow of a nobleman known as Geoffrey of Charny, described by some sources as being a member of the family of the grandson of Geoffroy de Charny, who was burned at the stake with de Molay. In 2009, Barbara Frau, a paleographer in the Vatican Secret Archives, claimed that the Shroud of Turin had been kept by the Templars after 1204. Frau also claimed that the burial certificate of Jesus the Nazarene, imprinted in fragments of Greek, Hebrew and Latin writing, is visible on the shroud. The so-called Temple Combe painting, a painting discovered in 1945 by Mrs. Molly Drew in the roof of an outhouse of a cottage in Temple Combe, England, has been alleged to be a copy of the image on the Turin shroud, and therefore evidence of the Turin shroud being in the possession of the Knights Templar during its hidden years. The painting has been on display in St. Mary's Church in the village since 1956, and has been carbon dated to c. 1280. Some people believe that it is a Templar-commissioned image of either Jesus Christ or the severed head of John the Baptist, although it is without a halo. De Molay's curse. Malcolm Barber discusses a supposed curse uttered by the last Grand Master of the Templar Order, Jacques de Molay, as he was burned at the stake in 1314. Jacques de Molay supposedly cursed Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V, saying that he would meet them before God before the year was out. Pope Clement died only a month later, and King Philip died later that year in a hunting accident. Barber traces this story to a verse chronicle attributed to Geoffrey of Paris. Geoffrey of Paris was, apparently, an eyewitness, who describes Molay as showing no sign of fear and, significantly, as telling those present that God would avenge their deaths. Albert Pike claimed the Knight Kadosh, the 30th degree within the ancient accepted and Scottish rite, commonly known as a vengeance degree, involved the trampling on the papal tiara and the royal crown, destined to wreak a just vengeance on the high criminals for the murder of de Molay. The figure of Harnmabeth representing Jacques de Molay, with the three assassins representing Philip IV of France, Pope Clement V and Squin de Florian. Malcolm Barber has cited a Masonic legend that resembles Pike's claims, in Louis Claude Cadet de Gassicourt Le Tombeau de Jacques Molay, a series of mid-20th century novels, Les Oies Maudits by Maurice Drouin, which were first published in 1955, expanded on the story of the curse of Jacques de Molay and the French monarchy in the 14th century. A frequent recurring legend relates how when Louis XVI was guillotined, an anonymous French Freemason rushed from the crowd, dipped his hand in the king's blood and yelled, "Jacques de Molay, thou art avenged." Quote, this story first appeared in the Illuminatus trilogy, a work of science fiction, in 1975. Claims of hidden survival supposed continuity in Freemasonry. Some historians and authors have tried to draw a link from Freemasonry and its many branches to the Templars. Degrees in the ancient and accepted Scottish rites such as the Knight of St. Andrew, the Knight of Rosquoy, and the 32nd degree in consistory make reference to a Masonic Knights Templar connection, but this is usually dismissed as being ceremonial and not historical fact. John J. Robinson argues for the Templar Masonic connection in his book Born in Blood, The Lost Secrets of Freemasonry, in which he alleges that some French Templars fled to Scotland after the suppression of the order, fearing persecution from both church and state. He claims they sought refuge with a lodge of Scottish stonemasons within which they began to teach the virtues of chivalry and obedience, using the builder's tools as a metaphor, and eventually they began taking in speculative Masons in order to ensure the continuation of the order. According to Robinson, the order existed in secret in this form until the formation of the United Grand Lodge of England in 1717. An example of Templar Masonic transitory symbolism can supposedly be found in Rosslyn Chapel, owned by the first Earls of Rosslyn, a family with well-documented ties to Scottish Freemasonry. However, Rosslyn Chapel itself dates from at least 100 years after the suppression of the Templars. The case is also made in Michael Bygent and Richard Lee's book The Temple and the Lodge. However, historians Mark Oxbrow, Ian Robertson, Karen Rawls and Louise Yeoman have each made it clear that the Sinclair family had no connection with the medieval Knights Templar. The Sinclairs' testimony against the Knights at the 1309 trial is not consistent with any alleged supporter membership in the Templars and the Grail. Karen Rawls states that among some 50 who testified against the Templars were Henry and William Sinclair, Knights Templar in Scotland since the 1980s. There has been a growing body of publications in both popular fiction and pseudo-history which construct a continuity between the historical presence of the Knights Templar in Scotland with the emergence of Masonic Scottish Knights Templar in the early modern period. The idea of an association with Rosslyn Chapel originates in the 1982 to the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and entered mainstream pop culture with Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, reinforced by the subsequent film of the same name. Numerous books were published after 2003 to cater to the popular interest in supposed connections between Rosslyn Chapel, Freemasonry, the Templars and the Holy Grail generated by Brown's novel. The tale of a missing Templar fleet is supposedly based on the protocol of the interrogation of Jean de Chalons by the Inquisition. He claimed that he had heard the preceptor of the French Templars, Gerard de Villiers, had been warned of his imminent arrest. De Villiers had escaped with 50 horses and 18 galleys. De Chalons' son, Hugues de Chalons, escaped with him carrying the wealth of his uncle, Hugues de Perrault. In Bygent and Lee's The Temple and the Lodge, the fleet carried the treasure of the Paris Preceptory of the Templars. Scotland became the destination of the fleet over 4 centuries later, in the claims of George Frederick Johnson, an exiled Jacobite living in Austria. Johnson, however, turned out to be a fraudster who was probably called Johann Samuel Leuchter. After a checkered career based on alchemy and forgery, Johnson convinced a Masonic lodge in Jena that he possessed the highest secrets of Masonry, and having declared the rest of German Masonry irregular, brought a surprising amount of lodges under his control. Exposed as a fraud by Karl Gotthelf von Hund in 1764, he was later apprehended by a previous victim and spent the rest of his life in prison. Hund's initial attraction to Johnson was spurred by a need to find his own superiors. He had been received into the Order of the Temple by high-ranking Jacobites in Paris during 1743, being introduced to Charles Edward Stuart himself. After the failure of the 1745 rebellion, his masters were either in hiding or dead, and had lost interest in maintaining the Templar offshoots, leaving Hund with a depleted ritual book which he had to reconstruct from memory. As Johnson's collection of lodges now looked to him for leadership, the rite of strict observance was born. Again, the Foundation myth alleged that Freemasonry was started by Templar refugees under the protection of Robert the Bruce. This time, they had traveled from France through England disguised as stone masons, and the use of Masonic symbols in their allegories paid tribute to this deception. Under Hund's leadership, the rite of strict observance became the most popular branch of Freemasonry in the German states, with lodges all over continental Europe. However, Hund's continuing inability to produce, or even contact his unknown superiors led to increasing dissatisfaction. 6 years after his death, a convent meeting in Wilhelmsbad from 1782 to 1783 finally agreed that Freemasonry had no connection to the Templars, and strict observance ceased to exist, most lodges being absorbed into the rectified Scottish Rite. For most of the previous 2 decades, the most common foundation myth among German Masons stated that Freemasonry came from the Knights Templar, protected and allowed to flourish in Scotland. In 1815, Claude Thory, a respected French scientist and Freemason, claimed that Robert the Bruce had created the Order of St. Andrew for Masons who had supported him at Bannockburn, which was later joined to the Order of Heredom, which he founded at Kilwinning. In 1837, a Scottish Freemason called James Burns, in attempting to revive a Scottish Order of Knights Templar, expanded the Masonic link to Bannockburn. He introduced the Knights Templar as the bearers on Freemasonry to Scotland, and had the Templars play a crucial part in the battle. This appears to be the basis of subsequent tales of Templar involvement at Bannockburn. The contemporary Royal Order of Scotland makes use of a similar foundation myth, which is no more intended to be taken as historical fact than any other piece of Masonic allegory. Discoverers of the New World Holy Blood, Holy Grail further embellished the Lost Fleet topos discussed above, alleging that the Templars in these ships fled to the New World by following old Viking routes, i.e., making one of the pre-Columbian voyages to America. Since the popularization of Holy Blood, Holy Grail with the commercial success of Dan Brown's 2003 novel, there have been numerous allusions to this idea in American pop culture. A supposed Templar treasure in Oak Island, Nova Scotia, Canada is featured in the 2004 movie National Treasure starring Nicolas Cage. As early as 2001, historian Helen Nicholson in A Popular History of the Templars dispels the idea that the Templars could spare ships to indulge in world exploration. The Templar Code for Dummies also points out the historical implausibility of this scenario. Friday the 13th. There is a modern urban legend to the effect that the tradition of Friday the 13th being unlucky originates with the date of the simultaneous arrest of many Templars at the behest of Philip IV on Friday, the 13th of October 1307.